Hello, everyone, and welcome to Celebrating Cinema, a podcast for the love of cinema. I'm your host, Laura Romans. If you're enjoying the show, we'd really appreciate it if you left us a review and shared it with a friend. It really helps other cinema lovers find us. Some filmmakers don't just make great films, they change who cinema is for. 60 years ago, Ousmane Sembène's film Black Girl announced a new cinematic voice to the world. Through the story of a young Senegalese woman working for a French family, Sembène exposed the enduring realities of colonialism while proving that African stories could and should be told on their own terms. To mark the film's 60th anniversary, Lab 111's in-house distribution label Odyssey Classics is bringing Black Girl back to cinemas.
Vous permettez, mademoiselle? Je n'ai jamais embrassé de négresse.
Que doit-on penser de moi à Dakar? Joanna est heureuse en France, que je vis bien.
Today, our producer Elliot Bloom speaks with Alain Sembène, the filmmaker's son, about the remarkable life and philosophy behind one of cinema's true pioneers. Together, they discuss why Sembène turned from literature to filmmaking, why he believed that cinema could become the people's night school, and how he dedicated his career to challenging audiences to question the systems that shape their lives. Here's Elliot in conversation with Alain Sembène.
So, Alain, it's great to speak with you. It really is an honor. I want to first start. Obviously, all of us know your father as the filmmaker, the big pipe in his mouth, big smile always. But for you, who was he as a father? Just simply as the man that was raising you. I'm very curious to know if he's the same kind of figure that we know him as.
So the image you described is really the public image. The man in the festival, interview, traveling around the world. At home, he was quite different. He could be very strict, austere, sometimes angry, often worried. So he worked all the time and was completely focused on what he has to do. So in one letter I found in the archive, because we have a lot of archive of him, he wrote that with every film, he felt he was putting his life on a stake.
Wow.
That say a lot. And so he lived with a real sense of urgency.
Mm.
But anyhow, yes, he has also his moment of warmth and relaxing, as you described.
I think that only adds to who he is as a person and sort of what he was doing. And I think it leads to my next question of how, as I said, right, he is considered father of African cinema in many ways. And because you see a very different side to what we as a public see, at what point did you realize your father wasn't just simply making films, or just this wasn't simply work, but he was really trying to change the way Africa saw itself?
I always knew that.
Mm.
A very strong sense of mission.
Mm.
For him, life could not be empty or passive. He has to have a purpose. And he believed he had something to do, something to say, and he could not live any other way. He was always focused on something. It's like he has never peace of mind. I have to do that, and so on. So he was always focused.
I can imagine he put a great sort of weight on himself to...
Yeah, exactly. Enormous weight. Yes.
Yeah. And obviously, I think people don't kind of realize just how much your father lived, sort of his journey, which we'll come to a bit later on, but how he ended up in France working as a dock worker, then a trade unionist. But your father was first and foremost famous for his books, his literature that he wrote. But he also said at some point he realized that across Africa that cinema was the way to reach people that books could not. He called film the people's night school. Do you know at all sort of what changed in his thinking, when and why cinema became the tool that he believed Africa needed?
For him, everything has a political meaning. Literature, cinema, trade unions, activism, everything. He read a lot. He loved books. But he saw that African did not read much. But they went to cinema. So he understood that cinema could reach more directly. It became a way to speak to other people, to workers, to people that who do not read, and so on. Foreign cinema was just another weapons in the same struggle.
It's a sentiment I believe as well, and so I think I've always found what I've loved about your father's films, it's really proof of how politically urgent cinema can be and just what is possible through creating films or telling stories through the moving image. As I said, your father had lived so much before he came to making films. When he made La Noire or The Black Girl, he was, I think, 40, which was in 1966. And so only in 1961, I was reading, he actually went to Moscow for filmmaking, to study filmmaking. Do you know a bit about that story at all? Sort of what experience gave to him? Maybe it also helped develop his own philosophical ideas, because obviously Moscow at that time is part of the Soviet Union, a communist state. Your father also was a communist trade unionist. Do you know sort of how his idea of cinema changed or how that influenced the films he made?
Okay, so he stayed in Moscow only a few months. Once I asked him why he did not stay for a full 5 years course. He told me I only wanted to learn how to use camera. He already knew what he wanted to say. He was already a writer and a political commitment man. So he did not want to be shaped by a film school. He told me that I just want to know exactly how to use camera. That's it.
So, as you said, your father was a writer. He already knew what he wanted to say. And what I find interesting is there's a lot of crossovers with his books and his literature with his films. And so, for instance, he wrote the book Le Docker Noir, where it's the story of a Senegalese writer whose work is stolen by a white female writer, I believe, and whose voice is therefore erased. Do you see Black Girl as him returning to that same wound 10 years later, as sort of this struggle over who has the authority to tell an African life?
Yes, but the fact is, we can say this is about the same story, but not exactly, because in the Docker Noir, he was proactive. He had to fight. But in La Noire 2, Joanna was passive, in fact. Both were naive. I mean, in Le Docker Noir, the writers thought that everything will be nice, he will publish, there will be no problem, and so on. So he has to face the reality. But at least he wrote his own book, you see. But in Black Girl, she just did what the people asked him her to do. So they are very different.
But yeah, this is now 60 years since that film was released. People, I think maybe more in the West, probably describe it as a film about representation. But to me, it's much more about authority, who gets to define another person's life, whose perspective we're allowed to inhabit. Is this sort of how you understand the film, or what is also this film to you? I'm sure so much more than what I've said.
The fact is, the problem with the Black Girl, there is several way to understand the film.
Mm.
And in the Black Girl, Joanna is a young woman full of life, hope of naivety. She is reduced to a simple object, a black object. That's what they call a black girl. In France, it is not black girl, it's la noire. It means the black of. This is like an object that belongs. She can be a chair, a dog, or a cat. So it is just an object. He has no humanity, and she did not expect that because she was young. She wanted to travel, to visit France. Okay, to buy new clothes, and people were very nice, and she faced this reality, and she was not prepared. But what you have to know in the book or in the film, this is her boyfriend. She want her, but she didn't want to listen to him. In the book, she has no boyfriend, but there is somebody who came back from France. She believes that everything will be nice. This is Europe and so on. But the reality is completely different.
I think, yeah, like you said before, that she's naive, but I think also that you're shown, or she sees the West or Europe or France in the way that France presents itself or wants it to be seen. But then she has to face the reality of what it's really like as a black woman living in France. But also, what I like about the imagery of the mask is also for France itself. It wears a mask of how it shows itself, and then when it takes the mask off, it's something different. And I think that's kind of the brilliance of this film. It's so simple in a way because it's just simply a woman going to live in France with a family, but then you see so much more, or the layers of how such a simple life is still affected by the colonial legacy of France and how it works.
The Sembène movies and even book, I mean, it's quite simple. This is the movies that are easy to understand. You see, this is not the kind of movies that at the end you don't know what the movie is about. You have the old pictures, but the fact is there is different way to understand the movie. That's what is the problem. You can see that Joanna is very naive. You see, in this world, you cannot be naive. But it is not only against the French, or even in the African society. Let's say if you watch the Manda or other movies, people are they don't want to make effort. They don't want to think, and this is a problem. And this is maybe what he shows in all of his movies and all of his books, that people are just naive because they don't want to think, and the consequences are terrible.
Your father also has this very famous speech where he says, Europe is not my center, that he is making films primarily or first and foremost for an African audience. And so I want to know, actually, it's kind of obvious what he means by that. And also, I think you explain it here in your what you just said of he's trying to challenge African audiences to think more for themselves, to maybe be a bit less naive sometimes. But perhaps you could expand on what he meant by this.
He said that Europe is not my center. I am my own center. The fact is, I think it was in Cannes, I think, when he said that. I think this sentence is addressed to African people, because he said that the African, like the Asian or like the Russian or like the British, they have to write their own story.
Mm,
I mean, everybody has to be his own center. And the fact is, in Senegal, people don't look at inside. They look at Europe, mainly Senghor, the negritude, and so on, or they look at Saudi Arabia, like the Muslim.
mm.
Even they look east or west, but they never look inside of them. They lose their identity, and that's what he show in many of his films, like Khala, like Chedo, and people, they have to keep to look inside. Also, what he's saying, that inside of everything there is things that you have to left. I mean, you have always to renew yourself, but anyhow, you have to look inside your heart. I mean, you have to trust yourself, and that he said, Europe is not my center. I am my own center, but these centers, even people, they think that this is against Europe or something. I will not follow. It's not the case. I mean, you have to look at yourself. Okay, and that's what he wrote in his book, donc Les bouts de bois de Dieu, and so on.
This is a side question, but how did that maybe shape how you see the world? Was this something he would teach you specifically as well? That Europe is not your center and how you look at yourself?
Yes, yes, yes. He says that when he says that you have to be at your center, it doesn't mean that you have to reject other people. This is the way around. But if you don't know who you are, you cannot collaborate with anybody. You have no identity. If you and me are working on a project, every part has to bring something.
I think what you're trying to say is that until you see yourself as equal to the other person, only then can you see the other person as equal to you.
Exactly, exactly. And then you can collaborate.
And obviously, with the legacy of colonialism and capitalism, we or people who are oppressed are made to think they are not equal, and so then don't put themselves as their center,
Exactly.
which I think is what your father's films were definitely trying to show.
That's why he's very difficult to understand because things are very simple. Europe is not my center, but there is 1,000 way to understand this sentence. When he says that, he's saying in a specific way. And what is nice in his work, starting from his first book to his last movie, and there is a consistency. You see, this is always the same ideas that he developed. He does not change. I mean, he's not political. He say yes today, tomorrow. No. And so to understand exactly what he says or what he thinks, you have to know all of his movies and also read his book. So
Yeah, yeah.
a lot of people actually there is a in Africa and everywhere. Also in Africa, people reject Europe,
Mm,
and even in Europe, European reject the African and the Arab, mainly in France. You see, but when you say Europe is not my center, it does not say that you have to reject other people, but you have to know who you are really. And if you don't know who you are, then you have nothing to say. I mean, you have no purpose.
mm.
You are like in the wind. You see, you don't know where you are going, left, right, and
Yeah.
you have no direction. You have to know your direction.
And I think it's interesting because maybe not enough people know that he spent quite a lot of his life in France, and especially in the beginning of his life as a soldier to a docker to a trade unionist. And so when he says Europe is not my center, like you said, you think maybe he's just rejecting Europe, but it's not. His idea of himself was maybe in the beginning shaped by Europe, and when as he realized this, he then changed how he was seeing himself, which you see through his writing and his films.
In the first book, Les Bouts de Bois de Dieu, this is a struggle, you see. And there is a somebody who is reading who read a book of Malraux, you see, and he talk about this book to the other people and to the other Africans and African they ask him why are you reading a book of André Malraux? He's a French. He is against us.
Mm,
You shouldn't read this book. You see,
mm,
and he said no, no. You have to open your mind. You have to open your mind to learn what people are thinking. Let's say in his cinemas and his literature, he invite people to open their mind to other culture.
we were talking about how Europe is not his center and how this shaped the films that he makes. But also, what's interesting about his films is that independence is never presented as the end of the story. And he is also as critical sometimes of African elites, the bureaucracy, the patriarchy within Africa, as he is about European colonialism. And he also once said, and I think, like you said already, that a society can only progress by asking questions of itself. I'm curious to know why you think it was so important that for him, he was always challenging the image of Africa through his cinema.
According to him, African was never truly independent. I mean, the colonialism has been replaced by the neo-colonialism. The French were replaced by the African political politician, local bourgeoisie, religious elite, and so on. But what is important to say, he did not fight against the European or the French or whatever. His struggle was against a system. Don't forget that he was a communist, and the goal was to fight the system. So I mean, even when Senegal was independent in 1960, things never changed. In fact, it's just they changed some people by other people, and it happens that people have different colors. But color is important. Has even in fact he was against negritude. You see, all his fight was against the system. The system, in fact, never changed.
Power is still power, right?
Yeah, yes, exactly. I mean, the politician, and now if you look at the situation in Africa, in Senegal, the situation is just catastrophic. You see, when you see the politician and the election, this is a nonsense, and people are very, very poor. In fact.
Across his films, like Black Girl, Sedo, Zala, and Mulade, it's often that women are clearly the sort of moral center of his stories. Why do you feel your father felt it was vital for women to be the protagonist?
He used to say some things, maybe it's funny, but if I were an African woman, I will never marry an African man. What he means is that African men, they often fail in their responsibilities. The woman, they have to hold their family, educate the children, keep the society standing. And that's what he showed even in his first movie, Nyai and Goram Saret, you see, and even in the last movie, Molade. The men, they just fell. And the person with, let's say, with keeping the society half alive, what can I say? The woman, according to him, you cannot rely on African men.
I mean, it sounds kind of obvious, the answer that you give, in terms of sort of the patriarchy and just how center women are in all societies, but yet it's still a very sharp way of thinking from your father during the times that he was in, where these weren't necessarily normal views. So I think it really shows how, and again, what you say about your father not necessarily being critical of Europe, but of the system, of just how coherent his whole view of society is, that he's able to be critical of every aspect that needs to be critical of, or that deserves criticism.
Let's say in his work, he does not give solution. But the fact is, and what is important, he invite people to have the right question. I don't know if I say what I say is correct. You have to ask the right question before finding a solution. So when you watch his movies, at the end, you ask yourself, I mean, the movie touch you. It's not the movie by itself but the story. When you watch it, for instance, a Black Girl, at the end of the movie, you see, you have many questions that come into your mind. And this is the purpose of his movie. He does not tell you, here is the solution.
As you say, your father is presenting us with these questions for us ourselves to come up with the solutions. And it was always his way, I think, of speaking to his people to be able to come up with the solutions, or to continue facing these questions. Keeping these films alive is essential. And I wonder, for you personally, at what point did you realize your own responsibility in the archival work that you do to keep your father's films still in a condition where people can still view them today?
When he passed away, I knew that his movies and his work could not disappear. I knew that if I don't do anything, just work will disappear. So the solution was not easy. So it almost 20 years that he passed away, you see. Let's say 95% of his, or 90% is safe. So I am very happy with that. I mean, if his work disappear, it will be a big mistake, you see, for everybody, you see, not only for Africa, but Europe and so on.
I wonder actually your own experiences of watching his films. Sort of, is there a favorite of yours?
I watched his movie several times and I am working now on his legacy. So what is strong in his movie is that he was able to see things that people just don't see. Like when you see Black Girl or Mandabi, those movies are factual.
Yeah.
You see Black Girl, you can say, okay, yes, this is today. I mean, now when you work, you are just the things. You work today they fire you, you have no right. This is the situation actually today. You work in a company, today you receive a mail, okay, we don't need you anymore. Bye bye. The people are just dehumanized. How do you say that? This is
Rehumanized.
the situation with Black Girl. And when the movie Mandabi, his second movies, was shown in Senegal, I mean, the authorities, the Senegalese, were very, very, very upset. They said, no, it's not Senegal. You are against us. He warned us. He said that in this organization, in this political organization, you are not going anywhere. Things tomorrow will be worse. It's not possible. So he was able to see things that people don't see. When you see Black Girl, let's say, there is 1,000 way to understand these movies. We were at Cambridge and we analyzed for 1 week Black Girl.
Oh, wow.
And we analyzed all the movies and there was one British guy. He showed that actually things that we don't do anymore in the when you see in the technical, let's say the technical part of the movie, there are a lot of mistakes, you see, or things that are not acceptable today, which is true, which is true. But the fact is, the movie today is still alive. And you understand, 60 years, people are still watching this movie. Why? Because it's like his movies and his work has a soul.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see, it's not just technical. This is a soul. This is
It shows just how powerful a story can be if it carries mistakes, but you don't notice them because
yeah. You don't notice them. He was very very. He was extremely open minded. I used to see in Senegal. I mean, every weekend, Saturday we have a house on the beach, and people used to come from everywhere in the world. No?
Mm.
There was any kind of people, you see, European, African, let's say gay, any kind of, you see. And every time we have a lot of discussion, people who are fighting, discussing, come back. And so every Sunday was like that.
Mm.
So he was a person who was extremely open minded.
And then you see that in his films, I think.
Yes, I mean that's why, and he accepted everybody. I met a woman. She was a friend, and she used to write each other for almost 30 years.
Wow.
This woman and her husband, they were just in Africa and in Vietnam during the war. They were on the other side. Let's say they were for the colonialism and everything. But when you read their letter, they were big friends. Every time to France, they have restaurants, they discuss, and so on and so on and so on. Every time. And she explained when they were very, very good friends. They did not have the same ideas. I mean, that's why he was very, very open minded.
I mean, I could talk to you for for a very long time. Maybe I'll ask you one final question, and that is clearly you see the importance of keeping your father's legacy alive, but is there perhaps something in particular about his legacy, his films, his books that deserves to be remembered, especially in the time that we live right now?
I mean, the message will be open your mind. And he used to say, all that I know it from other people. So he used to travel all the time and so on. That's what I would say.
Yeah, Alain, thank you so much for speaking with me. It was really a pleasure to speak.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks so much for listening. If you'd like to experience Black Girl on the big screen, you'll find tickets in the show notes. On our next episode, filmmaker Kiriko Mechanicus is joined by filmmaker and archivist Jenna Basako to explore Black Girl itself, asking why, 6 years later, it remains one of cinema's most urgent and influential films. Stay connected with us at Celebrating Cinema and Lab by following @Lab111 on Instagram and Letterboxd. Do you love what we do? Support us by leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us climb the ranks of the podcast charts. This was a Lab 111 production, edited and produced by Elliot Bloom, and co-produced by myself, Laura Romans. Music comes from Hugo Emertsal, and the artwork is by Studio FFF.